In this video, we'll deal with the RecyclerView. So first of all, what is RecyclerView? RecyclerView is used to display a set of data, just like this. So you define how each item looks, and the RecyclerView dynamically creates the elements when they're needed, or recycle one of them from the existing stack. Now you know why it's called RecyclerView. There are a few things we need to do first. We have to define the data. We have to design the layout of the individual items. We have to decide what the list is going to look like. Is it vertical, horizontal, a grid? We have to decide how each element in the list behaves when you click on it, for example. And define the adapter that associates our data with each element in the list. So let's get started by creating a class to hold the data items. Usually you create classes to hold data. That works just fine, but in Kotlin and some other languages, there is the concept of data classes. A data class main purpose is to hold data and does not encapsulate any additional logic. So to create a class, find the package folder here in the Java folder, right click on it, new, and choose Kotlin file class. Select the class and type in the name. So I'll call it transaction. It's a convention to have a class name start with a capital letter. So hit enter and we have our file. By default, it's a class. So let's add the keyword data class to tell Kotlin it's a data class. And since it's a data class, it takes parameters. We need two parameters, the label and the amount, just like these elements. So let's define val label and the type it's a string. And the other one is val amount and the type is float or double. Okay, we're done. We don't need to specify anything else, no copy or toString methods. The data class is taking care of that. So save this and close it. So next step, let's create a layout for transaction item. In the res folder, layout folder, right click and new layout resource file. Give it a name. Let's call it transaction layout. Okay. Here we have by default constraint layout. And since our elements are aligned horizontally, let's replace it by linear layout. Okay. So for the height, I want it to wrap contents, and for the width, leave it to match parents. This one is by default horizontal. So let's add a text view and wrap content. So for text field, just to see how it looks like, let's add bananas and give it an ID because we'll need it later. This is the label. The style, I want the label to have a text size of 20 SP and I want a margin start of 6 dp and I want it to take all the available space in the parents. So let's set layout weight to 1. Okay, and that's it for the label. We add the next text view and it's wrap content, close it, give it an ID. The ID is amount. So I want the amount to have a text size of 20 SP and a margin and of 12 dp. For text, for the demo purpose, let's set $12. Okay, so I want my item to be a little bit higher than this. So let's set actually the linear layout height to 45 dp instead of wrap content. And we want the elements to be aligned, the child elements to be aligned vertically. So gravity, center, vertical. Okay, so that's it. Actually, not really. I want the element to have a ripple effect when I click on them. So clickable, set it to true, so the element is clickable, and add a background. So by default, Android Studio provides a style, a selectable item background. So type in selectable item background. Okay. That's it for transaction layout. Now we need to find a way to provide the binding from the dataset to the views that are displayed within the recycler view following the transaction layout model we just created. This is the job of RecyclerView Adapter. So let's create a new class and call it transaction adapter. In Java folder, the package name, right click, new, Kotlin file class, select it's a class and call it transaction adapter. Hit enter. Okay, so this class needs to extend the RecyclerView adapter. And it has one parameter, which is the data we want to bind. So private val transactions, and it's of type array list of transactions. So the class we created earlier. So this class needs to extend the RecyclerView dot adapter class. So this class needs a view holder. So we need to create this view holder to be able to use it. But wait, what is a view holder? So a view holder is a Kotlin class object that is used to map the transaction layout we built to the recycler view, so it knows what our transaction layout contains and how to set values like the label and the amount and how to interact with it. So let's define another class and call it transaction holder. This holder have parameter which is a view of type view, and it inherits RecyclerView dot view holder, which takes into parameters the view we created earlier. So here, this class wasn't imported yet, so right click on it and hit Alt or Option and enter, and it imported just here. Or just hover over it and click import. Okay, so it extends view holder and it does few things. So this class extends the recycler view holder and connect these text views right here, these text views to these variables. So here we define a variable called label, and this variable is of type text view, and to find it we use the view, we pass in parameter. So the view refers to the transaction layout, and transaction layout has two elements, two text views, label and amount. And here if you type in label, it will recognize it, so hit, actually no, and here we have to find the element by ID, so find by ID and type in r.id.label. So the R here is for resources, and when we define elements we gave them IDs, and these IDs are stored in this variable. Now we do the same thing for the amount, so replace label by amount and here by amount. Okay, now we have our two fields. Let's finish this. So the transaction adapter has a parameter which is transactions and implements or extends the RecyclerView adapter and specifies which view holder it will use. And this is the view holder we just created. So it's transaction holder. Okay. Now it's still red because we missed the parentheses. You know, it's okay. Here we have the class name underlined in red, and it says transaction adapter is not abstract and does not implement abstract based class members. And it tells us which members we need. So the adapter class needs to implement 3 methods for it to work properly. First one is the onCreateViewHolder method. The RecyclerView invokes it to create a new view holder, but does not fill in the data. We have the onBindViewHolder. The RecyclerView calls it to associate a view holder with a data instance and fill in each field. And the getItemAccount, which returns the size of the dataset. The RecyclerView uses it to determine when to stop displaying new items. So let's define these bad boys. So on create, select this one. We have the parent and the view type. So we won't need this variable because we only have one view holder type. So it doesn't matter. But if you had multiple view types, so each one will have a view type number, and then the view holder knows which view holder to use. So let's remove the to. And in this class, we want to inflate our transaction layout and create a transaction view holder and return it. So let's do this. Val view equal layout inflator to inflate it. And inflate from what? From the parent context. Parent.context. So the parent refers to the parent view group. So for example, in the main activity, the parent of this linear layout is this relative layout. And in transaction layout, the parent of this text view is this linear layout. Let's get back to our transaction adapter. Okay, so we inflate from the parent, inflate, and we want it to inflate the layout we defined, which is transaction layout. And we wanted the root element, which is the parent, and set the last parameter, which is attached to root, and set it to false. It's always false, don't worry about this value. Okay, now we have to return it, or return a transaction view holder. Transaction view holder, which takes parameter, a view. Now this function is called to create transaction view holder. And this view holder is used to bind these values to the text view in the transaction layout. And later we'll use this transaction holder to set the label and amount values and the colors and size and the clicks and all of it. So on create view holder is done. Let's head to the onBind view holder. Bind view holder. So here we have 2 parameters, transaction holder, the one created by create view holder, and a position, which is the position of the item in the transactions list. Let's remove this. So remember, onBind view holder is called to associate view holder with a data instance and fill in each field. So first of all, let's get our transaction. Val transaction equals transactions, and get the element at the position. We'll need a context. So the context, let's bring it from the view, the holder. So the holder has an element that has context. And actually it's the same context if we replace amount by value or by label, because they are in the same context. So what is a context? It is basically the current state of the activity or the application. It lets new created objects like this one understand what has been done till then. We can pass it as an argument to the transaction adapter or extract it from any view in the adapter class, just as we did here. So we'll need it in the next step. So now I want to set my values. So here you can see that if the amount is positive, we have plus sign and a green color. If it's negative, we have minus sign and a red color. So let's do this. If transaction that amount is greater or equal to 0, then I want a plus and a green color. So holder dot amount. So we're referencing this transaction holder, which has an amount field. It's a text view, so set text. And the text we want to add a plus sign, then a dollar sign, and we want our number to have 2 digits. So let's add 0.2f or just 0.2f and add format and give it the parameter. So the format, it will take transaction amount double and put it just here. Actually, we need the percentage sign. It will replace these characters with the amount with just 2 decimal digits. So the second thing, I want my holder amount color to be set text color to green. So to use the color here, we have to use another class which is called context compat. It has a function or method named getColor, and the color needs a context and the ID of the color. So this is when we use our defined context and we give it the color, the ID of the color. So we want the green color, r.color.id dot red green. So here you see the green is an integer. Selected green. Now let's do an else statement. In the else statement, I will just replace this, copy, paste it, change color to red, change the sign to minus, and since the transaction amount is negative, I don't want to have 2 negative signs, so I'll take the absolute value of this. So it's math with capital M dot abs, and this takes only the absolute value of the transaction amount. Okay, we're done with the onBind view holder. Now the last thing is to define the get item count. So the get item count is pretty simple. Return transactions dot size. Okay, we're done with the adapter. Oh, actually, I forgot something. On the bind view holder, we need to set the holder label text to the transaction label. Okay, now we're done with this. So let's close this. And okay, the adapter class is ready. Now let's connect what we created so far. The recycler view needs a few things. It needs an adapter to know how it should look and behave and what kind of data it displays, and the layout manager to tell it how it should position items and when to recycle one of them that are off screen. In our case, we want a linear layout manager, and by default it's vertical. But first we need to define the data we want to display. So let's create our data list, private. So we'll define this this object outside the onCreate method and within the class. So every method of this class can access this object. If you define it in onCreate, then you can't access it out of onCreate method. So private late init var. So late init means that, don't worry Kotlin, this variable will be initialized, but later, not now. I just need to define it here and initialize it later. So our object is transactions, and the type is array list of transaction. Okay. Now our transaction will be initialized here. Transactions equal array list of, and here we give it all the elements we like to display. So create a transaction object. It needs a label. Let's give it weekend budget, and the amount, let's say it's 400, and remember it's a double. Let's actually copy paste this multiple times. So the second one, I want it to be bananas, and it cost me, let's say, $4, therefore minus sign. And third one is gasoline, cost me, let's say, 40 and 90 cents. Let's say it's for breakfast, cost me $9.99. Since it's a weekend, we need to drink water, so water bottles, and it should cost, let's say, $4. And the last thing, or two last things, let's add some sun cream for $8, and the car park for actually it was the wrong one. Let's put 15 here and minus 8 here, and just remove the last one. Okay, we're done with the transactions. Now we said that we needed an adapter, so let's define our adapter. Private late init var adapter, or transaction adapter of type transaction adapter. And the last one is layout manager, so private late init var layout manager, and layout manager is a linear layout manager. Okay, now we need to initialize the transaction adapter. So transaction adapter equals transaction adapter, and remember our transaction adapter needs parameter, which is transactions, data. So let's give it transactions. The linear layout, or the linear manager, or the linear layout manager, layout manager equals linear layout manager of type, actually linear layout manager needs to know the context. So the context is this. So this refers to this class, which is the context. Now I need you to remember the ID that we gave to our RecyclerView. We call it RecyclerView. So just start typing in the name or the ID, and here you can see RecyclerView from activity main XML for blah 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 blah, and it's a RecyclerView. So select this one, it will import it here. Just add it here. And the recycler view needs two things. Let's hit apply. It's the adapter, which is a transaction adapter, and the layout manager. And since this parameter is called layout manager, let's change this one to be linear layout manager. Okay. And type in linear layout manager. Okay, so the recycler view is ready. We can test it. So just run this and wait for it to launch. Okay, and here it is. Our elements are here. So you notice that the total balance, the budget and expense are all wrong. So we need to set them. And I'd like to add some space here and there. So let's do this first. In the activity main, the recycler view, add some, actually let's set margin all the way. So we have margin on the start, the end, top and bottom. Save this, close it. And let's update and let's compute balance, budget and expense. So let's create a class and call it update dashboard, or actually a function, not a class, private fun update dashboard. So we need three variables: the total amount, which is the sum of all the elements in the transaction list. So let's use transactions list, and we want to map through it and take only the amount. So basically what this code here does, it goes over all the elements in the transaction and only takes the amount and add it to an empty list. So the result of this thing is a new list with only the amounts of transaction. So it's a list of doubles, and we want to sum over them. So just sum over the list, and here we have a double, which is total amount. Let's do the same thing for budget, val budget amount, it equals transactions. So for the budgets, it's a little bit trickier. So we want only the amounts that are greater or equal to 0, or actually greater than 0. Therefore, we have to filter them, then map and sum. Filtering is getting only the values we want. So let's use transaction.filter, and we give it the condition. So it refers to the elements in the transaction. So every it is transaction, like it's shown here. So transaction has an amount. If the amount is greater than 0, then I want it to get in my list. So here it is a list of transactions that have the amounts greater than 0. Now I want to map them and get only the amount. So it's map. The condition is amount. So this one is the list of all the amounts of the transactions that are greater than 0. So it's a double list. And I want to sum on them, over them. So hit sum. Now it's double. Okay, the last one is the expense. And the expense is the easiest one, just total amount minus budget amount. Now we have our values. We need to map them to the layout. Put them here, here, and here. So remember, the names are expense, are budget, expense, and balance. Main activity, just like for the recycler view, type in the name of the text view and hit enter. It will import it and set text equal to first the sign, and we want only 2 digits, so %.2f dot format, and format what? The total amount. Copy paste this 2 times, change balance with budget, actually just budget, import it, replace this one by expense, import it, change this to budget amount and this to expense amount. And now we're done. Let's run this and wait 1 or 2 seconds, and there's something wrong. Actually, we didn't call it. We defined it, but we didn't call it. So we need to call it once the recycler view is set. So update dashboard, save. Okay, now we have right budget, expense, and total balance. That's it for this video. In the next one, we'll deal with the add button, and we'll create another activity to fill in the label, the amount, and some description, and add it to this transaction list. See you then.